And of course, there will be times that we will encounter error while opening files, whether it's opening file for input or opening file for output. Opening a file could fail for several reasons. So what are those reasons? These are some of them. First, it could be that the file might not exist. So for example, you mentioned a file as an argument for your open function, but the file is actually non-existent. So that will raise an error. Or the name might be typed incorrectly. That can also be possible. And another problem is there may be no error message if the call to open fails. So that can also be a problem if you are going to deploy your program. So program execution might still continue. So what we do with that is we explicitly catch those errors. So that's why there's such a thing called catching stream errors. Because there will be times that those errors might not manifest themselves. So it would be better that if we are going to explicitly capture them. So we have the following function. So we have the member function named fail, which can be used to test the success of a stream operation. Fail returns a Boolean type. So of course, it will either give us a value of true or false if the file was indeed opened successfully. It returns true if the stream operation failed. Otherwise, if the operation was successful, then of course, fail would be false. Next, after we capture the file error, the sensible thing to do is, of course, for us to stop the execution. Of course, there's no point in continuing the execution of the program if there was indeed an error in the opening of our input file. So when a stream open function fails, it is generally best to stop the program. The function exist halts the program. So as you can see here, we have the function exit, which is intended to do to stop the execution of our program. So exit returns its arguments to the operating system, so which means it simply stops the execution of our program once an error was encountered. So exit causes program execution to stop. And of course, take note that exit is not a member function. Okay? But to do that, it requires a certain library which contains our exit function. So it requires the include and using directives such as this one. So we need to include the cstdlib library using our include directive. So how do we use fail and exit? So we've already mentioned that we can use the fail function to determine if the file was opened successfully or not. And at the same time, we can use the exit function to end the execution of our program if our file open routine failed. So we have the following example. So let's take a look. So here's example 5.2. Okay, so again, it's actually quite similar from our previous example here. Okay, so we still need to use the fstream and the iostream library, and this time we are going to include the cstdlib for us to make use of the functions that we have mentioned a while ago. So we will do the same routine actually. Okay, so we will simply open the files We have the same routine as the previous example, only that this time we would like to capture errors in case there's an error related to the opening of our files. So if you will recall, this is the actual file name that we used. So for example, we will change this one. Okay? In order for us to raise an error due to a file not existing. So for example, we will change this to in file none. Okay, so this obviously this file name is non-existent, okay, because we only have infile.dat and not infile_none.dat. So we are going to run this program and see what happens. Okay, let's execute the program and see what happens. Okay, as expected, this raised an error. Input file opening failed. Okay, so this is what happened. After we attempted to open this file name, so we call the fail function of instream, and of course it indeed failed. So therefore there's no such file as this one, so therefore an error was raised. And we also called the exit function, which as a result halted the execution of our program. So what are some of the techniques for file I/O? So when reading input from a file, we do not include prompts or echo the input. That wouldn't make sense, especially if we are opening a file which is quite large. So that would be annoying to display the contents of a large file into your monitor. Okay, for example, this one. It will also make your input routine shorter. And the input file must contain exactly the data expected. And we can also append data, because what happens actually is that every time we output something into our output file, it will be overwritten. But what if you would like to preserve the previous content of our output file? Then we can simply append our new output into our already existing output file. So to append new output to the end of an existing file, we use the following. Okay, so we use ios up, which simply means that we would like to append an output to our output file, just like this one. So as you can see here, okay, we called the open function of our output stream, and this time we provided two arguments. So previously we only provide one argument, which is simply the file name. This time we provided another argument, which is actually an option which tells our compiler that we would like to append whatever output to this output file. So which means the old contents of this output file will not be overridden. And of course, if the file does not exist, a new file will be created. Now let's take a look at an example of how we can append data to an already existing file. So to see how we can append data, let's take a look at example 5.3. So in this example, we will still use the following. Okay, we use the F stream for us to make use of input file stream and output file stream for our input and output files. So what we will do here is we are going to open the following file and use it for output. So this is where we're going to write the output of our program. So again, we called the open member function, okay, of our fout variable, which is of type output file stream. And this time, take note that we provided two arguments. First, the file name, and the other one is an option which tells our compiler that we would like to append the output of our program to the contents of this file. Okay, so this is what we are going to write into our program. Now, let's try to run this program and see what happens. Okay, so the execution was successful. So let's take a look what happened in our output file. So again, take note that this is the only output that our program will produce, and that will be appended to whatever is the content of our output file. Now let's take a look what's inside our output file, which is the data.txt. So this is what we have right now. So this is the output that was appended by our program, and this is the default content of the file. Okay, so as you can see here, we were able to preserve the original content of our file, and this time we only appended a new output into our file. Next, talking about file names as input. Program users can enter the name of a file to use for input or for output. And also, programs must use a variable that can hold multiple characters. It could be a sequence of characters, which we can call a string. And we can also declare a variable to hold a string of characters. As you can see here, we declare a character variable which can contain 16 characters. Although we will be dealing with arrays as we go, so actually if you take a look at this, this is actually an array of 16 characters. And we can also use a character string. So for example, we have the following. So we can enter the file name. Okay, this time we are using our cn statement. And of course, based on the file name that we provided as input, that will now be used as the argument for our open function. And again, if that file name does not exist, that will also raise an error. So let's take a look at another example. Okay, this one. So for example, we have the following declarations. Okay, and this is our input file and output file. So this is what the program does. Okay, it will sum three numbers taken from an input and write the sum to an output file. Okay, so it will ask for the file name as well as the output file name, and that's what will happen. So let's say okay, so for example, we will simply use the file names that we already have. So we are going to use this one, in file dot and out file .dat. Okay, so let's run this program. Okay. So we will use, for example, in file.dat, and let's say we will use out file.dat. Okay, so the program executed successfully, and of course, I guess we already know what the output will be. But anyway, for the sake of demonstration, let's take a look what happened here. So there it is. The sum of the first three numbers in this file is 6. Okay. So if you will recall, okay, we used outfile.dat in our first example, right? Okay, so this was the original content of our output file. Okay, but of course, if you will notice here, okay, we did not specify that we would like to append the content of this program. So therefore, the original file was overwritten. So that's what happened.